Good morning, I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Right now on Morning News Now, high-stakes speech, the eyes of the world on President Biden as he prepares to make his first presidential UN address. More on his message to allies as pressure mounts over international issues, from the coronavirus to Afghanistan to climate change. Grim milestone. COVID-19 now responsible for about as many American deaths as the Spanish flu, with September on track to be one of the deadliest months of the pandemic yet.
It can happen to you. It can happen to anyone.
We'll take you to one of the hardest hit areas, plus new developments in the push for booster shots, this time for the one-dose Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Signs of trouble. New information this morning about the days leading up to the disappearance of Gabby Petito as the FBI searched the home of her fiancé, a person of interest who hasn't been seen in a week. What we're learning about the investigation, including an odd text sent to Gabby's mother. And Housing Hurdle, a popular real estate website accused of favoring realtors over homeowners trying to sell on their own. Why those homeowners say the system is costing them tens of thousands of dollars. And of course, with the real estate market as hot as it is, that is a great consumer alert we'll have later from our friend Vicki Wynn.
Especially with all the folks who love Zillow.
Yeah, really. I like to peruse it, even though I have nothing to sell or buy quite yet. Yeah. All right, we'll get to that later. We begin this hour, though, with President Biden taking the world stage, set to address an in-person audience at the United Nations 76th Annual General Assembly.
President Biden is expected to address key issues like the pandemic, climate change, the Afghanistan withdrawal, and his latest submarine deal with Australia and the UK.
He kicked off his visit to New York by participating in a bilateral meeting with the United Nations Secretary General yesterday. The president said the partnership between the United States and the UN is based on common values and principle.
The vision of the United Nations has never been short in ambition, any more than our Constitution. But the ambition matters. Today, governments continue to work, they must continue to work together in a system built on international law to deliver equitable prosperity, peace, and security for everyone.
Later today, leaders from the U.S. and U.K. will head to Washington with Prime Minister Boris Johnson set to visit the White House tonight. It will be their first meeting there during the Biden presidency. NBC News White House correspondent Jeff Bennett is following the president today here in New York. Jeff, President Biden's New York stint began last night. What tone did he set for his first General Assembly?
Hey, Joe, good morning. It's good to see you. Well, the message the president brought here to the UN General Assembly is a familiar one, and it's familiar because it's the same thing he said to the allies when he toured Europe back in June, attending the G7 and NATO summits there. And that message is America is back. And that is precisely what he said yesterday as he was sitting alongside the UN Secretary General. So expect the president today, when he speaks at 10 a.m. Eastern, to talk in depth and in detail about the challenges not only the U.S. faces, but the challenges that the global community face. That includes, chiefly, COVID and climate change. On COVID, expect the president to talk about the ways in which he intends to rally world ambition to increase the pace of vaccinations. The complicating factor there, of course, is that it was the World Health Organization just last week that criticized the initial U.S. plan to roll out booster shots, giving Americans effectively a third dose before so much of the world has even gotten their first dose of the COVID vaccine. On climate, same thing. Expect him to sort of rally world support to cut carbon emissions dramatically over the next 2 decades. The complicating factor there is that in this country, climate policy is wrapped up in that reconciliation bill, that $3.5 trillion social spending bill. And the future of that, Joe, as you well know, is unclear right now.
So, Jeff, now as world leaders come together, the White House is trying to do damage control in its relationship with a key ally, France, after striking a deal to provide nuclear-powered subs to Australia. Is the president expected to say anything or address this today at the General Assembly?
Not specifically in his speech, but you're right. I mean, it's an important story. It's a development that's sort of playing out against the president's appearance here. The fact that the French are publicly upset. I mean, there was this diplomatic dust-up that they felt entirely left out of this national security agreement among the U.S., UK, and Australia, thereby not letting France get into what would have been a very lucrative military contract for them. Don't expect the president to speak specifically about that. But there is a part of this trip that is focused on fence mending, not just the public spat with French officials, but also to include the U.S. exit from Afghanistan, the allies feeling, some of them, that they weren't fully consulted in the range of decision-making there.
And Jeff, President Biden's diplomatic work doesn't end after his speech today. Of course, it never really ends. But as we mentioned, he has a meeting at the White House with UK's Prime Minister. What's expected to come from that?
Yeah, it's interesting. They could have had what's known as a pull-aside here at the UN, where literally an official will pull another aside in one of the hallways here and have a conversation. It was important to Boris Johnson and the Brits to have that White House backdrop. So that meeting will happen back in Washington, D.C. later today. You can expect that they will talk about some of the tensions over the Afghanistan exit that we just addressed. But really, it's a chance for the two to reaffirm the U.S. commitment to the U.K. Don't expect any gaffes, any sort of miscalculations or any sort of embarrassments there. It's really just a chance for the two of them to sit and talk to one another.
And Boris Johnson spoke with our Savannah Guthrie. We'll have more on that in the next hour. Jeff Bennett here in New York. Jeff, thanks so much.
This month, September 2021, is now on track to be the deadliest month in the coronavirus pandemic since February. So far, more than 32,000 Americans have died from COVID in September. An average of 2,000 people are dying every day, numbers we haven't seen since the winter surge. Nationwide, cases are starting to decline, but the overall infection rate is still high. And COVID is far from going away. That's especially the case in Iowa, where the Des Moines Register says, on average, someone reported positive for COVID-19 about once every 50 seconds over the past 7 days. Joining me now from Des Moines is NBC News correspondent Ellison Barber. Ellison, good morning. So first, just tell us, with numbers like that, how are hospitals doing across the state?
They're under pressure. I mean, resources, personnel, those things are limited, and they are seeing jumps in infection rates in this state that they really have not seen since January. When you look at hospitalizations, 90%, according to the state's health department, of people who are in ICUs in this state because of COVID-19 are unvaccinated. Statewide, about 65% of Iowans over the age of 18 are fully vaccinated, but the numbers they're seeing right now are raising a lot of eyebrows and worrying a lot of health officials. Savannah?
Absolutely. And now that's kind of the bigger, broader picture. And let's talk about some of these individual stories. I mean, I know that you spoke with a woman whose husband died of COVID even after getting the vaccine, even as people who were taking it seriously, wearing masks, doing all the right things. What did she tell you about her experience?
Yeah, she told us that she and her husband, Gary, they attended a gathering about a month ago, early August, and that there were a lot of people there. She said it was indoors. No one wore masks. They were fully vaccinated, but others were not. Both she and her husband had pre-existing conditions, but they'd been fully vaccinated for months. They say that they came into contact with someone who was not vaccinated, and both of them got sick. In all, they say about a dozen people attending this event contracted COVID-19. Ardith, Gary's wife, she survived after getting sick. Her husband, Gary, did not. She and Gary's immediate family, they are angry because they feel like this was entirely avoidable. And in their obituary, they made it very clear how Gary got sick, writing this in part, quote, Gary's life was unnecessarily cut short. He was one of several victims recently infected from an unmasked, unvaccinated person. Here's more of what his wife told us.
Did you ever have a moment where you thought, well, why did we even bother getting vaccinated if this was still going to happen? How come?
No, I'm still alive. And everybody thought it would kill me. I have family members that don't agree with me. And I guess that's their right. But Gary and I had rights too. And he doesn't have them anymore. So I just want people to listen and maybe change their minds about how they feel.
And And she told us she and Gary's children are trying to use this opportunity to encourage others to get vaccinated. And if they're not vaccinated, to follow the protocols that we know help prevent the spread. She says she and her family, they wish they'd never attended that event. Gary was 77 years old, but his wife said he had so much more life to live. Savannah, his newest grandson was born days after he passed away.
Oh, Allison, that is just heartbreaking to hear. Thank you so much for your reporting.
Let's bring in Dr. Amish Adalja. He's a senior scholar at the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security. Dr. Adalja, good to have you with us. I mean, we just heard that heartbreaking story there from Ellison. Help us understand, how common are breakthrough cases? What should people know about them, even if they're vaccinated, and what their risks are right now?
So breakthrough infections are still relatively rare. They're not to be expected if you've been fully vaccinated, but they do occur. And there are some estimates of maybe 1 in 5,000, 1 in 10,000 per day that's the risk. And it sometimes is more frequent when you're talking about some of the variants like the Delta variant versus other versions of the virus, for example, the Alpha variant. So this is something that we're going to see. And breakthrough infections were expected, but when they're severe, that's extremely rare. To see someone die from a breakthrough infection is not the norm. What we know is that our vaccines are extremely, extremely good at protecting against serious disease, hospitalization, and death. And so to hear that story, it's one of the exceptions to the rule, but I think it really it underscores the fact that vaccination is always going to be the best method, but there are going to be some of these cases. This is why there's a debate over boosters, especially for those above the age of 65, like this individual you're talking about. But it is something that I think we're going to have to face every now and then, that these types of severe infections occur.
Now, Doctor, we're also learning more about the possibility of a booster shot for the one-dose Johnson & Johnson vaccine, something that a lot of people have been waiting on. J&J says its vaccine does hold up well against the different COVID variants, but new data shows it's 94% effective 2 months after the first dose to get that booster. But the company says after 6 months, the booster provides more protection. What do you make of this data, and what does it mean considering the FDA's recent decision on those Pfizer booster shots?
There had been a lot of talk from the very beginning that Johnson & Johnson might try to develop a 2-dose version of their vaccine. Their single-dose vaccine does work very well against serious disease, but they were studying a 2-dose regimen to see could it be any better, and it does look like it may be better. And I think this is going to be something that they'll actually publish the data on. This is just a press release we're seeing today. And then the FDA will look at that information and decide, should the Johnson & Johnson vaccine become a 2-dose regimen? Should it be considered a booster that you get? But this is all going to be something that's going to play out over the next weeks and months to really optimize the way we're using these vaccines and decide which groups benefit from 2 doses, which groups are okay with 1 dose, just like we saw with the Pfizer type of discussion that happened last week and will continue this week.
And Dr. Adalja, Pfizer came out with data yesterday saying its vaccine is safe for kids between 5 and 11. Here's what Dr. Anthony Fauci told our Tom Yamas about that last night on Top Story here on NBC News Now.
I have every reason to believe that the data are going to show, which they claim it does, that this vaccine is safe and induces the kind of immune response in children that you would predict would protect them. So I wouldn't think at all that parents need to worry. Vaccines don't go into anyone in this country unless the FDA gives its regulatory approval, and that would be the next step.
So, Doctor, my question is, I mean, health officials are still having trouble convincing some adults to get the vaccine. So if the parents aren't getting the shot, what do you think is going to happen once more children are eligible? Are you worried many of them won't get the shot?
There definitely is going to be vaccine hesitancy. We can just anticipate it in the parents of 5 to 11-year-olds because there's vaccine hesitancy in the parents of 12 to 17-year-olds, who only about 50% have gotten vaccination. So we are going to face that same problem. And I think that's why it's really important that people have confidence in the process, that this is a safe and effective vaccine, that they used a different dose, that there was a completely different trial done. But we are hitting that wall where many people don't want to get vaccinated and they don't want their kids to get vaccinated. And I think this is a challenge. And I don't think that we expected this would be what would be holding up control of the pandemic. But I do know when this vaccine does eventually get emergency use authorization for people 5 to 11, that there's going to be parents that line up on the first day. And in general, more vaccine shots into people's arms, even if they don't get to 100% of the 5 to 11 group, is still going to be something that proves an obstacle for the virus. The more immunity we have in our population, the harder it is for this virus to spread, and the less disruptive COVID-19 becomes, especially to schools that are trying to stay in-person learning this year. All
right, Dr. Amish Adolja, as always, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Troubling new images are coming in from the Haitian migrant crisis at the southern border, and we want to warn you, they are disturbing. They appear to show a U.S. Border Patrol agent in Del Rio, Texas, on horseback, chasing migrants trying to get to the United States. NBC News Justice correspondent Julia Ainsley joins us now. Julia, now these pictures have been widely shared. They're causing quite a bit of backlash. And yesterday, Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas was asked about them when he was at the border. What did he say? And what is the rest of the Biden administration saying about what these images seem to show?
Well, there seems to be a difference between what Secretary Mayorkas said and what Jen Psaki said from the White House yesterday. Secretary Mayorkas said that they need to take time to be able to see this picture from a different angle. And Jen Psaki said they were obviously horrific. Now, there is quite a lot of debate about this picture, and I would definitely encourage viewers to take a close look at it. What appears to be happening is that an agent is on horseback grabbing a migrant by the shirt while his horse reins dangle. But a lot of people have seen a lot of discussion on Twitter talk about, are those reins being used as a whip? It's not clear to me that they are. DHS has yet to put out a statement on this. I do have new reporting that this incident has been referred internally to Customs and Border Protection's Office of Professional Responsibility. They're the ones who conduct investigations on employees. I will say from my own experience, I've seen immigrants apprehended when they're crossing the border illegally. They do get grabbed by the shirt. They do get thrown to the ground. It's much like an arrest that you would see a police officer do from someone who is on the run. It can be quite jarring and quite disturbing. And I think that's what we're seeing firsthand here. But I do want to have a bigger conversation about what exactly we're seeing in this picture and get some answers before we start saying this man is being whipped, because it's not immediately clear. So that's the best I can do for now on that picture. But it is something to look at and something to discuss.
No, absolutely. And that's very important context. And we should certainly wait for that information before we make any type of definitive call on what's happening there. Now, Julia, you report that more than 20,000 Haitians are now in Colombia and could possibly migrate north to the U.S. Can you tell us more about the conditions they're facing, where they're headed, and what might happen given the numbers that we are already seeing that's overwhelming this particular border town?
That's right. So we obtained new documents last night. These are internal documents shared within DHS that they're monitoring other pockets of Haitian migrants, Haitians who left the island nation and went to other countries like Colombia and Peru, and they're watching as they may try to now come to the United States. It's sort of the way you would have seen a caravan gather in the past. They say that 20,000 have basically amassed in a northern Colombia city, and that they're watching to see if they may too try to immigrate to the United States. What's happening here and why it's different from groups we've seen in the past is that they're bigger and oftentimes they move faster. And it is obviously triggered by the horrible events in Haiti, where these people now feel like they left their home, they can't go back because of the political and natural disasters that have come and shaken their nation even more so than it already was when they left. And a lot of the economic opportunities have dried up in these Central American and South American nations where they've been living. So they may now choose to move. The issue is just the overwhelming numbers and the fact that DHS can't really handle these 15,000 now. So what happens when more come?
Absolutely. And Julia, those conditions that you mentioned is causing many to say that they're coming here to seek asylum. So what is the status of deportations along the border? What's happening when somebody comes and says, I'm seeking asylum? What's happening to families? Walk us through the latest.
Well, it really depends on who you are. Right now, the Biden administration is still using Title 42. That's that Trump-era authority that they started under the first days of the pandemic to expel immigrants, even those who are seeking asylum outside of the United States. It used to mean pushing them back into Mexico. Mexico essentially said, we're at capacity. So many of them are actually being flown back to Haiti. But still, for single children who come unaccompanied and families who are seeking asylum, we understand they will have a chance to stay here and seek asylum.
All right, Julia Ainsley, thank you so much. And again, much needed and very important context so that we're not spreading any type of misinformation when we see images like that. Thank you so much for your reporting this morning.
We have seen sobering images from the southern border where thousands of Haitian migrants are hoping to enter the U.S. NBC's Vaughn Hilliard takes a closer look at just how far some migrants travel to get to the border and the dangers they faced along the way.
Deep in the jungle in Panama, parents clinging to their children, bracing for the hundreds of miles ahead. Thousands of migrants, many of them Haitian, hoping to soon reach the United States. But this is just one stop on a journey that for many extends more than a decade and thousands of miles. One that requires passing through here, the treacherous mountainous jungle called the Darien Gap near the border of Panama and Colombia.
Todo está muy difícil para nosotros. Pero la cosa está así, tiene que hacerlo para buscar una vida nueva.
Panamanian officials say about 70,000 migrants have made the trek this year alone. Most of these Haitians now arriving to the U.S. border have lived in Central or South America for years, finding refuge there after the 2010 earthquake that killed more than 200,000 in their homeland. They fled for countries like Chile and Brazil, which at the time needed workers and initially even offered humanitarian visas.
Just how large of a Haitian population there is that has been residing over the last 10 years in South America, in Central America.
These are individuals who left earlier periods of unrest and went to countries like Chile in the tens of thousands to be able to find some sort of security there.
Haiti's foreign minister in 2016 told the Miami Herald that 40,000 Haitians were living in Ecuador at the time, another 60,000 in Chile, and more than 95,000 in Brazil. But now, years later, as the pandemic endures and countries' economies increasingly tighten, many of those migrants set off to find refuge yet again, but further north. Now, a remarkable number in distress, waiting at the doorstep of America. But their route will not end here, the Biden administration says. Most will be removed from the country under a COVID-era public health policy.
They're maintaining Trump-era policies, but I think that there's a perception that perhaps they are being more welcoming than they actually are. People want to leave. There's a perception perhaps that the Biden administration might be more welcoming despite of the realities of the ground.
Their destination, now the very place they first fled, the poorest nation in the Western Hemisphere.
Time to get a check on your morning news now weather.
Which, of course, means that Bill Cairns is here now. Hey, Bill, good morning.
Hey, good morning. So we got some great weather and we got some areas that are going to need umbrellas today. Nothing severe. We're not worried about tornadoes or anything like that. Tropics are still active, but everything's out to sea. So we're mostly just going to focus on these areas of rain. And how about Savannah, Georgia yesterday? 6 inches of rain. We thought there was a chance for some heavy rain, but that was ridiculous. So this morning, we're really tracking the heaviest rain in areas of the Midwest, trying to push into the Ohio Valley. Chicago hasn't been too bad. We had some thunderstorms overnight that woke some people up around St. Louis, and now those storms are sweeping through southern Illinois and into Indiana. Also some storms there as you head down from Springfield into the Ozarks of northern Arkansas. So for today, we'll watch those storms pushing into Indiana. Interstate 70 won't be a fun drive. Detroit, bring your umbrella for storms later on today. And from Charlotte to Roanoke, we're going to get some decent rain. And then just a really soaking downpour type day from Cincinnati all through Ohio, Pittsburgh, Buffalo tomorrow, Roanoke. So again, if you're on the East Coast and the Mid-Atlantic, the high population cities from D.C. to Boston, you're good until Wednesday evening, but then Wednesday evening and Thursday is when that mess will be in the Northeast. So enjoy today if you can. So the forecast for rainfall, heaviest North Carolina, Virginia, areas of Pennsylvania, and especially there in the Ohio Valley. So for today, as I said, enjoy it. 75 and mostly sunny in New York. And how about Texas, guys? It was 100 yesterday in Dallas. Today is 85. That'll feel enjoyable.
Get your coat. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Bill.
Yes. Thanks, Bill. See you soon.
Coming up, a 911 call, an odd text, and concerns about mental health. After the break, new information about the days before the disappearance of Gabby Petito and the search now for her fiancé as investigators visit his family home.
We'll have that plus the first legal challenge of Texas's new abortion ban. Details on a lawsuit filed against a doctor who admits to defying the law. This is Morning News Now.
Now to the ongoing investigation into Gabby Petito's disappearance. On Monday, the FBI raided the home that Petito and her fiancé, Brian Laundrie, shared with his parents. Petito is believed to be dead after authorities found remains consistent with her description in a Wyoming national park. Laundrie is still considered a person of interest, and authorities say they don't know where he is. The story is gripping the nation as a heartbroken Petito family begs for answers. NBC News correspondent Jay Gray joins us now from Northport, Florida, with the latest on the search and the ongoing investigation. First, Jay, tell us more about the search warrant. Do we know if the FBI found anything of interest, or did the warrant reveal any new details about the case?
Yeah, and I think, Joe, good morning to you. The answer to both those questions is yes. So they pulled several boxes from the Laundrie home yesterday, and the search warrant said that they were after data, basically, computers, hardware, software, any text message, any external hard drives that might be there. And this all sparked by a text, the last text that Gabby Petito's mom said she received from her, saying that, asking her mom if she could get in touch with Stan, who is Gabby's grandfather, that she had been getting some text and couldn't get in touch with him. She said it really struck her as odd because Gabby never called him Stan, and that's when she thought there could be some issues there. So building on that, in a hard drive that was found in the van that they were traveling in, FBI agents went into the house, spent about 5.5, 6 hours inside and outside the residence searching for information. As I said, pulled several boxes out of the house and also towed away the silver Mustang that Brian Laundrie had been seen driving. So that's the evidence they recovered yesterday. Haven't shared a lot about that. Obviously, they're not going to. It's an ongoing investigation.
Jay, we saw the body cam footage from police in Utah after they pulled over Petito and Laundrie back in August. Now we have newly released audio from the 911 call that alerted police to that incident. I want to play a bit of that.
We drove by and the gentleman was slapping the girl.
He was slapping her?
Yes, and then we stopped. They ran up and down the sidewalk. He proceeded to hit her, hopped in the car, and they drove off.
So, Jay, is this call having any impact on the investigation, even though it is from before Gabby disappeared?
Yeah, and look, what, Joe, investigators are telling us is that everything matters in this case, right? So anything they can get prior to Gabby's disappearance or death, as it appears to be here, helps to build their case and helps them to understand more about what happened. They're not saying that it's a key piece of evidence. They are saying, though, that the 911 call, the police body cam, does matter as they continue their investigation.
All right, and we should note an autopsy on that body that was found in Wyoming is scheduled for later today. Jay, thanks so much. Appreciate your reporting.
All right, this morning, the first legal test of that controversial Texas abortion law has been set in motion. A doctor in Texas is now being sued after he admitted he performed an abortion in violation of the new law. In an op-ed published in the Washington Post this weekend, Dr. Alan Braid explained that he performed the abortion to test the constitutionality of the law, fully expecting to face the consequences. The new legislation can only be enforced through private lawsuits. So now, two plaintiffs, one from Arkansas and one from Illinois, are suing that doctor. If they win their case under the new law, they could be awarded at least $10,000. NBC News legal analyst Danny Ceballos joins us now from Danny, good morning. There's a lot to unpack here. So let me just start with the fact that this is a test, really, of the Texas law. Now, I just mentioned Arkansas and Illinois. So can anyone decide to sue someone in the state of Texas over this? And also, in terms of the why here, one of the two plaintiffs has already admitted they want to claim the $10,000 in damages. Tell us about these plaintiffs and what kind of burden they carry in a case like this.
These are what we call pro se plaintiffs, people proceeding on their own. Even though one of them used to be a lawyer who has apparently been disbarred, he is suing on his own behalf. So he counts as a pro se plaintiff or someone representing themselves. And pro se plaintiffs are at once the glory and also the bane of the legal system. They are what probably the Constitution maybe envisioned, but at the same time, practically, they can be a disaster in both civil and criminal court. But Dr. Braid could not have gotten a better set of plaintiffs to go after him in court. One of them, Felipe Gomez in Illinois, doesn't even really want the money, it appears. He's actually aligned with the doctor, and he uses the complaint as more of a motion to strike down the law. In fact, it is that kind of procedural oddity that might get the case tossed. But Oscar Stilley, the plaintiff in Arkansas, is even more interesting. His complaint, if you can read it, Savannah, is, I'm going to use a legal term, bonkers. It is going to highlight how exactly silly this law can be.
Yeah, I mean, it really is interesting, and especially with them coming from these two different states, it almost feels limitless in terms of who actually could decide to sue here. So now let's talk about the other side of this, the doctor. What can his defense look like? And is his defense really a test of how constitutional this law is, especially given who these plaintiffs are?
The only defense is constitutional. I mean, he's all but admitted the facts that make up a violation of the statute. So there's very little fact-finding to be done. This case will probably go right up on appeal very quickly because it's really just an issue of law. But as I said before, Dr. Braid is aided in his defense by these pro se complaints, which may actually be procedurally infirm. In other words, they may not have enough to move forward. I mean, the only thing the Stilley complaint has going for it is that he is asking for the money. He appears to want it, but the remainder of his complaint is railing against the government for convicting him in his own criminal case. So this is the kind of thing that is worth a read, not something you normally see, and not the best drafted pleading I've seen.
You said it, not me. Bonkers. All right, Danny, before I let you go, I want to ask you about something else kind of related here. We know the Supreme Court is scheduled to hear the Mississippi abortion case in December. So tell us how the court actually hearing that case is different than what's happened in Texas thus far, and what does it potentially mean for Roe v. Wade?
It's a similar law in Missouri, but what's fascinating about it is that this case was an injunction. And all the court is saying at the district court level is that we're putting a pause on this law until we figure things out. Then a 3-judge panel of the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals upheld that injunction. But this is where it gets strange. The entire 8th Circuit, which is 18 judges, moved on its own to say, you know what, we're taking it away from that 3-judge panel and we're deciding it ourselves. So I did a bit of research. Now, that 3-judge panel had 2 Republican appointees and 1 Democrat appointee. But when you look at the full 18-judge panel in the 8th Circuit, 17 Republican appointees, 1 Democrat appointee. This is going to be an interesting case.
All right, Danny Savalos, thank you so much.
Let's take a look at what's making news around the world this morning.
Matt Bodner is back with us this morning from Moscow. Good morning, Matt.
Savannah, Joe, good morning. Well, let's start things off today in Canada, where Justin Trudeau has held on to his post as Prime Minister after parliamentary elections were held yesterday. Though he secured re-election, things did not go as Trudeau may have hoped. This was a snap election. It was actually called by Trudeau 2 years earlier than would have been mandated. Many interpreted this as a bit of a bold move to try to take more seats in Parliament for his Liberal Party. If that was the case, it didn't quite work. Trudeau's party actually lost 1 seat, but the balance of power in Canada remains more or less the same. Moving along now to the Vatican, where the city-state has issued a decree requiring visitors to present proof of vaccination from COVID-19 to enter. The decree will go into effect on October 1st. It will recognize both European and foreign vaccination certificates. We'll see how that works in practice. There will still be some exemptions to this rule for specific individuals, and this will, for non-vaccinated individuals, that is, and this will be allowing them to be admitted with a negative PCR or antigen test. And finally, we have some royal family news. There's a new royal baby. Princess Beatrice, the oldest daughter of Prince Andrew and Sarah, the Duchess of York, celebrated the arrival of their first child, a baby girl, over the weekend. The baby's name has not yet been shared publicly, but she was born Saturday evening and weighs 6 pounds and 2 ounces. So congratulations to them. Back to you guys.
Yes, congrats to them, Matt. Thanks so much. Coming up, living in limbo, frustration for thousands of immigrants who thought they were protected from deportation.
I'm allowed to be angry because Biden isn't taking action. It makes me wonder, should I keep on fighting? Is any of my hard work worth it? Because nobody cares. That's how it feels.
To return the political and legal fight that has many young immigrants on edge over their status. You're watching Morning News Now.
And welcome back. One speech to the United Nations has racked up more than 1 million views on YouTube, but it didn't come from a world leader or policymaker. K-pop superstars BTS gave a 7-minute address about the hopes and fears of younger generations. Then the group got permission to dance, and the assembly watched a clip of the group performing their latest hit, Permission to Dance, inside the halls of the UN building in New York. Here it is. The group is actually South Korea's special presidential envoys at the assembly. Fans flooded the UN video's comment section with the group's signature purple heart emoji. As you probably know, Joe, the fans are called Army, and anything they do, they are all over. So I'm not surprised to hear that.
I'm betting the UN YouTube page is not used to so much participation.
Yeah, I bet they're like, who should we get next? Because this is working for us.
All right, thank you, Savannah.
Yeah.
Thousands of immigrants who applied for Daca remain in limbo this morning. Daca is the Obama-era program that protects hundreds of thousands of young immigrants from deportation. Back in July, a federal judge declared the program unlawful, ordering the Biden administration to stop granting new applications. The White House hit back, appealing the decision earlier this month, but for some, the damage has already been done. NBC News Now correspondent Isa Gutierrez spoke to one applicant whose life came to a halt after the program was suspended. She joins us now with more. Isa, good morning.
Good morning, Joe. I spoke with a 19-year-old in Maryland who actually got to the last step in her approval process. She was told at that point to just wait for her acceptance letter in the mail, but that day never came.
This is the website where I check my status on my Daca. It's kind of like my daily task. As you can see here, it just says my case is being actively reviewed by USCIS. It's been like that for months, and I'm kind of losing hope that it's going to change at all.
For 19-year-old Michelle Lainez, getting approved for the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, better known as DACA, wasn't supposed to be this difficult after President Trump left office.
I couldn't apply for DACA because under Trump, he rescinded the program first. But then under the Biden administration, the program reopened. I was so happy. I was like, oh my gosh, this is my chance. This is my opportunity. I'm going to take it.
Lainez, who came to the U.S. with her mom from El Salvador when she was just 4 years old, applied for DACA in March. Just 2 months later, she got her biometrics done, which is usually one of the last steps in the approval process.
They take your picture, you put your fingerprints, so it felt official. They tell you, okay, you're gonna get a letter in the mail saying that your thing is approved and you just wait for your work permit. So that's what I was doing.
In July, federal judge Andrew Hanen in Texas declared DACA illegal. While DACA renewals were allowed to move forward, the ruling blocked new applications from being approved, leaving Lainez and thousands of others like her in limbo.
Just this morning, again, I got an offer for a job that I applied to, and I was explaining to her how I had applied for this program to get a work permit, but now it doesn't seem certain, so I won't be able to do the job. And I have been kind of depressed on my part because it's like I have opportunities presented to me, I just can't take them.
You're angry.
Oh yeah, I'm angry. I'm allowed to be angry because Biden isn't taking action. It makes me wonder, like, should I keep on fighting? Is any of my hard work worth it? Because nobody cares. That's how it feels.
Back in July, Biden called the Texas ruling deeply disappointing and said the Justice Department would appeal the court decision, which they did on September 10th. Now, immigration advocates are putting pressure on Congress and the administration to come up with a permanent fix, not only for DACA, but also for the 11 million undocumented people living in the U.S.
DACA was only temporary, and it can be taken away. It's not a permanent solution. It's just a Band-Aid.
The case will now go to the 5th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. Now, this court is known to be one of the most conservative appellate panels across the country. It was the same court that back in 2015 affirmed another ruling by Judge Hanen, striking down a deferred action program for parents of U.S. citizens. Joe?
All right. Isa Gutierrez, thank you so much.
Coming up, a debt crisis in China making waves a world away.
Up next, we'll explain what's happening that's having ripple effects on Wall Street and what it all means for you. You're watching Morning News Now. U.S. markets tumbled on Monday. Why? Well, a Chinese firm's debt crisis is making American investors uneasy, but that's not the only reason. NBC News senior business correspondent Stephanie Rule breaks down what's going on and what it all means for your investments.
Hey there, Joe and Savannah. Even if you're not someone who traditionally watches the markets, if you've just got a 401k, you're asking the question, what in the world is going on here? Well, there's a few things. Starting overseas. In China, Evergrande, that's a massive Chinese company, is at risk of defaulting on $300 billion worth of loans. And you might say, I don't even know what that company is. Well, here's why it matters. It could mean that the global economy is not as strong as we thought it was. While here in Washington, more gridlock. They haven't set a new budget, which means we could get a federal government shutdown. On top of that, Congress still hasn't agreed on infrastructure or the debt ceiling. Meanwhile, the Federal Reserve is meeting this week and could signal that they may look to raise interest rates in the future. And lastly, there's you and me, the American consumer. We still are out there spending, but we're not as optimistic or enthusiastic about the U.S. economy going forward, or at least as we have been over the last few months. And that's largely because the Delta variant continues to spread and prices on almost everything are so high. All of this has Wall Street very worried. And many people are saying, is this going to get much worse? We can't tell. But for those who are saying, is this a dip and a buying opportunity? Well, that depends on who you are. For those out there who've been eyeing specific stocks for a long time, waiting for a time to get in because you want to make a long-term investment, well, a dip, this could be a moment where you do want to step in. But if you're someone who's saying, hey, I want to start playing the market, you need to pay attention to the word playing. If you're going to play the markets, remember, when you're playing, somebody wins and somebody loses, and you better be prepared to lose. Joe, Savannah?
All right, good advice. Stephanie, thanks so much.
Now it's time for our CNBC Money Minute. Let's stay on this, the biggest financial headlines of the day and why they matter to you.
Silvana Henao joins us now. Hey, Silvana, good morning.
Good morning. Apple just released the latest version of its operating system, iOS 15, with several new features, including the ability for FaceTime to make calls to Windows and Android users. FaceTime used to be reserved for Apple products only. iOS 15 also upgraded privacy protections, so users can now check their app privacy report, which will show how often an app accessed a user's microphone or location over the last week. And for those users getting distracted on the go, now Apple Maps will remind commuters to get off the bus, train, or subway before they miss their stop. Meanwhile, Netflix is launching a free mobile plan in Kenya as a streaming giant looks to expand internationally and tap into developing markets. Kenya is home to over 20 million internet users. Netflix says the free plan, which will be rolled out in the coming weeks, will not include ads and will not require new users to provide any payment information during sign-up. The company tells Reuters it will make about 1/4 of its movie and television show catalogs available to these users in Kenya. And food delivery platform DoorDash is expanding its alcohol delivery service beyond California to include 20 new states and the District of Columbia, plus Canada and Australia. Customers in these markets aged 21 and older will be able to order drinks from restaurants, grocery stores, local retailers, and convenience stores. The company will require ID verification at checkout in the app and again by the delivery driver at the door. Back to you.
Seems like a smart business to get into. All right,
definitely.
Silvana, thank you so much.
Sure thing.
Now, with the red-hot housing market, many people are looking to sell, and a growing number of homeowners are turning to sites like Zillow to save on real estate fees. But NBC News investigative and consumer correspondent Vicky Nguyen shows us why it may not be so easy or profitable.
Home after home, hundreds of thousands of properties available at your fingertips on Zillow. But if you're looking to sell without a real estate agent representing you, some homeowners say Zillow and its affiliate Trulia can make it harder for buyers to ever see your listing.
I thought, let's give it a try.
Heather Tomayasu told us she tried selling her home in New York without a real estate agent to save tens of thousands of dollars.
Why do I want to pay this huge commission to a realtor when I don't think I really need them?
So she posted her home on Zillow, for sale by owner. But instead of getting calls from interested buyers,
I started getting bombarded by really annoying realtors.
Real estate agents calling to see if she wanted to work with them. In January, Zillow updated its website, making it harder for buyers to see homes listed for sale by owner. Just watch what happens when I search for homes in a place like Dallas. It shows me thousands of listings in the area, but those are not the only homes for sale. By default, Zillow only shows me the homes that are listed by a real estate agent on a multiple listing service. To see homes listed for sale by owner, you have to click on this tab called Other Listings.
Consumers are not seeing these homes.
Michael Toth is an attorney for Rex, an online brokerage company that helps people sell their homes, charging an average 3.3% commission compared to the 5 to 6% from traditional real estate agents.
American home buyers deserve better. American home sellers deserve more choice.
Rex filed an antitrust lawsuit against Zillow and the National Association of Realtors, alleging they make it harder to find homes not represented by an agent. According to a Rex analysis of 14 properties from earlier this year, the average listing with a real estate agent on Zillow got 212 page views, while homes in the Other tab only had 34. That's 84% fewer views.
I'm not surprised that a little tweak to a website interface could have such a big impact.
Benjamin Keys is a professor of real estate at the Wharton School who says the current online marketplace makes it harder to sell without an agent.
I think there are legitimate concerns about whether there is equal access for those who are using a realtor and those who are not.
One more hurdle, if a buyer gets to a for sale by owner listing like this one, there's a big message button at the top. Click on that. It doesn't actually put you in touch with the homeowner trying to sell the home. Instead, it sends you to a bunch of different real estate agents hoping to represent you. To contact the actual seller, you have to scroll down to here. In a statement, Zillow says it provides a free service to help consumers advertise their homes for sale by owner, a service most other real estate websites do not provide, adding that outdated rules required Zillow to change the way listings appear, and they call Rex's claims without merit. The National Association of Realtors tells NBC News how Zillow displays listings is between Zillow and each local multiple listing service, pointing out the court has said Rex is not likely to prevail in its antitrust lawsuit. Keys says there are benefits to using an agent.
A real estate agent is going to provide a lot of guidance into how to market the property, how to take the best pictures, where to set the right asking price.
Now, you might be wondering if the government is doing anything about this. Well, the Department of Justice recently broadened the scope of an investigation into the National Association of Realtors. The DOJ is now looking at claims that the group is asking sites like Zillow to put for sale by owner listings in a separate search tab. NAR told us they have no say in how websites like Zillow operate. And as for Heather, after a month of sitting on the market with few leads, she gave up on trying to sell on her own. She later hired a realtor and sold her home in 2 weeks for the Standard Commission.
Coming up, climate change taking a toll on some neighborhoods more than others.
Yeah, up next, more on the science that links heat and race. You're watching Morning News Now.
As the hottest summer on record comes to an end, the Biden administration says it's working to protect Americans from what's being called a silent killer, extreme heat.
Yeah, and it can be especially dangerous in minority communities disproportionately impacted by climate change. In fact, some of those communities are significantly hotter than others nearby. As part of our series Climate Challenge, NBC News correspondent Morgan Radford explains the phenomenon known as urban heat islands.
Joe, Savannah, good morning. You all know how hot it has been this summer, but did you know that it can actually be even more hot in one neighborhood than in another, even in the exact same city? Well, now there's data that shows that many wealthier, whiter neighborhoods are actually a little bit cooler than lower income, often non-white neighborhoods. Take a look at a group that's working to understand the problem, but also to change it.
From the moment her day begins.
Describe the heat. What does it feel like?
Well, I wipe the sweat off. I'm melting.
Annie Moore has to fight the heat.
Get out about 7 o'clock before it really steams up by 10:30.
So you have to, plan your day around the heat.
I do.
She's now one of hundreds of volunteers.
This reads the temperature, and you watch the temperature on the app on your phone.
Working on a project called Urban Heat ATL. Volunteers using special technology to map Atlanta's temperature, block by block.
What type of neighborhood are we in right now?
We're in a predominantly black neighborhood.
And how hot is it here?
It's about 92
0.6 degrees Fahrenheit.
The goal? To prove some neighborhoods are hotter than others. New research shows in more than 70% of U.S. counties, low-income, non-white neighborhoods experience more extreme surface heat than their wealthier, whiter counterparts. The reason? Urban heat islands, unshaded asphalt areas that amplify heat.
We see that black and brown neighborhoods are simply hotter or feel hotter than white ones. Why is that?
We have a lack of green space, lack of parks, perhaps a lack of trees. And that sort of critical natural infrastructure are the things that help us to cool our communities.
So what does the solution look like when all this is said and done?
We hope that government officials will respond to our data. We want to see more well-maintained parks, green space, and trees in communities of color.
Changes that can't come soon enough for Annie.
I think we need to really rethink, how do we keep the earth cool? Now it's time for us to fix it.
Working to fix a global problem one step at a time. Morgan Radford, NBC News, Atlanta.
All right, Morgan Radford, thank you so much.
That does it for this hour of Morning News Now.
The news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.